Oh, we're live. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It looks like we're still behind the member, but there's no member to be behind here on the set yet. It's coming in, don't worry. We're back with episode 3 with Sayyid Hossein Al-Qazwini. We couldn't we can't get tired of you, Sayyid. Not like we could do 30 episodes with you.
I'm at your service, inshallah.
One day, inshallah. How are you tonight? How's everything?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I really enjoyed the topic that we spoke about tonight, which was the love of flattery. Great topic. It did hit home in a few places, so I guess there's always room to improve for anyone. The topic of this podcast, though, today is not the love of flattery. It is about something where if you go to any Instagram comment section, on TikTok, anywhere where you're going to find a Shi'i reciting Qur'an, especially now during Shahr Ramadan, everyone's reciting Qur'an. It's the thing to do. But you're going to find a bunch of comments saying, how can you read a Qur'an that you don't believe is authentic? Mm-hmm. And that's the topic that we have today. Tahrif al-Qur'an, or the inauthenticity of the Qur'an. Has the Qur'an been edited? Is it original? These are some of the questions we're going to answer today. We're going to also talk about the opinions of our scholars, and we're going to ask some questions about, we've heard of a book called Mushaf Fatima or Sahifatu Ali. These are some of the things we're going to dig into today. But just to get started, I want to talk about the authenticity of the Qur'an from a general sense. So, in university, when we were studying, I did a minor in history of religions. And one of the things that when we were studying Islam is the Qur'an really authentic? Not that is it the word of God or the word of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Rather, was it even written during the time of Muhammad? Or was it written up to 200 years later? So this is a theory held in the more academic circles. So in the secular academic circles in universities here, some positions are advanced that hold that the Qur'an was not even fully compiled or written until 200 years after the death of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Of course, this is something we disagree with, but as a scholar, I want to ask you, if you're first familiar with this position, have you heard it? And if we have any narrations or points that counter that claim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. To claim that the first copies of the Qur'an came up 200 years after the death of the Prophet, this is baseless. We know for a fact that towards the end of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's life, when the Qur'an was complete, when the last verse was revealed, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-Islam dina. Surah Al-Ma'idah was the last chapter to be revealed, and specifically this verse. Rasulullah made copies of the Qur'an. There were several copies, several masahif, and these masahif were widespread. They were dispersed in the Ummah, in Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya, among several of the Sahaba, and after that, wherever they went, they took copies of the Qur'an. So, and plus, there were several Sahaba who had memorized the Qur'an by heart, word for word. Many of them had memorized the Qur'an word for word, and there were those who wrote the Qur'an. Rasulullah made sure that before his death, he puts the Qur'an in the order that we see it today, beginning from Surah Al-Fatiha, ending with Surah An-Nas, and in the exact order that we see it today. And these copies were dispersed among the Sahaba. Perhaps not all of the Sahaba had a copy, but there were lots of copies of the Qur'an before Rasulullah had passed away. So to say that the first copy of the Qur'an comes 200 years after the death of Rasulullah, this is not accurate.
Ahsantum. So I assume we're now gonna look into just the strictly within Islam, um, and kind of the sectarian divide when it comes to the Quran. Not that we believe there is one, or maybe I'll ask you that if we believe there is one, but uh, there is a claim advanced by the majority of the Muslim population of our Sunni brothers and sisters, a lot of them, where they say that no, you guys, you don't believe in the Quran. Anytime they see, a Shi'i reciter, mashallah, we have amazing reciters in Iraq, in Iran, in Afghanistan, even the Afghan community here, fantastic reciters, amazing. But oh my God, how dare you recite a book that you claim is inauthentic or it is corrupted? They say the Quran. A lot of these comments are in Arabic. You find they say the Quran, is there's inharaf in it, munharif. So we need to. I'd like to ask you to respond to that. But I'd just like to give a quick example. There's this beautiful video of a child that's going on. It's viral on Instagram right now. It's in Iran on one of those these shows that are like, it was just released recently, and he's reciting إذا الشمس كورت, and then in a very high pitched, beautiful melodical tone. I open the comment section. At least the top 10 to 20 comments are all the same thing. How is in Arabic, but translated, how is this child reading a Quran that he does not believe is real? So, Sayyidina, do we in the Shi'i school of thought, or the Usuli Shi'i school of thought generally, do we believe that the Quran is corrupted? And where do these claims come from?
The funny thing is, Sunnis and Shi'as accuse each other of believing that the Quran is distorted. They both accuse each other. Sunnis accuse Shi'as of believing that the Quran is distorted. Some Shi'as accuse some Sunnis of believing that the Quran is distorted. And at the end of the day, both don't believe that the Quran is distorted. Neither do Shi'as believe, nor do Sunnis believe that the Quran is distorted or tampered with. Yes, there are some Shi'as that a very, very, very small fraction, a small group in Shi'ism that hold this belief, but we will get back to them. They are not mainstream. They are not orthodox. They are not the majority. They're a very, very small minority. And a lot of them have akhbari tendencies. They base their arguments on akhbar. And they don't believe, that very small minority don't believe that there are additions to the Quran. They believe there are subtractions from the Quran, meaning some verses were taken away, taken out of the Quran. Not that there were additions to the Quran. That very, very small minority who are outcasts and are not accepted, and they don't have the courage to come out and say it in public. In Shi'i circles, I'm talking about in Shi'i circles, they're a very small minority. Even if they were to believe that the Quran is distorted, they believe that some verses were taken out. They haven't been added. However, the vast majority of our ulama, starting from Sayyid al-Murtada, Shaykh al-Tusi, before him, Shaykh al-Mufid, up till our time of Sayyid al-Khuy and Sayyid al-Sistani, our scholars believe that the Quran has not been tampered with. Yes, we have Al-Mirza Nuri, who wrote a treatise on this, believing that the Quran has been tampered with, but Al-Mirza Nuri was denounced by the majority of our ulama for this belief, although he's a great scholar. He has other contributions, but specifically on the book, in believing that the Quran has been tampered with, he was denounced. And of course, Mirza Nuri has akhbari tendencies. And so in this point of view, he's an outcast. In this point of view that the Quran has been tampered with. The vast majority of our scholars do not believe so. The problem is that we have certain narrations that could be found in Al-Kafi, they can be found in other narrations, in other books, that can, if you misread them, you will think that the Quran has been tampered with, or there are additions, or some of the verses have been changed. But this is not how it is. And there are traditions in Sunni books of hadith that also have the same. I will mention them in a minute. So we have certain traditions that say, for example, إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. We have a narration that says وآل Muhammad. The verse had وآل Muhammad. And the Imam says هكذا نزلت. For example, the vast majority of ulama, they say that these narrations show the ta'wil of the verse, the interpretation of the verse, not saying that this is how it was revealed.
And these hadith, these narrations, they have, their chains are reliable.
Some are reliable, some are not. There are a hadith with reliable chain of narrators that say the verse had this or had that, or there's a word here, there's a word that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the verse was, but it was tampered with. It was changed. No. Most of our ulama, including Sayyid Al-Khoi in his Al-Bayan fi Tafsir Al-Qur'an, which is a 1-volume book on tafsir. Unfortunately, he didn't get to finish it, but that 1 volume is very significant. It's very important. He says that these verses show the ta'wil of the verse, the interpretation, the hidden meaning of the verse, the interpretation of the verse. It's not saying that these verses were tampered with. Most of them show the ta'wil of the verse, the tafsir of the verse. While in Sunni books, you will find a hadith that explicitly show that the Qur'an was changed. So
I've heard one about, I don't know, there was a goat that ate a few pigs.
Yes. There's
Is that a real thing?
Yes, there's a hadith by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari that the verses of the Qur'an were so and so, but a goat came and ate a bunch of its pages, and hence the Qur'an was tampered. I mean, imagine, so silly.
That the
book of Allah, the religion of Allah, is destroyed by a goat.
It's like when you go to school and you say, "Oh, my homework got eaten by my dog or something."
I know that our Sunni brothers and sisters don't accept these hadith. They don't believe that. They don't believe that the Qur'an has been tampered with or has been changed, or that this is not the original Qur'an. The original Qur'an was much bigger. They believe this is the actual Qur'an. But if it's about a hadith, they have a hadith as well. They have a hadith that the Qur'an was much bigger. Or there's a verse, there's a hadith by Umar ibn al-Khattab that Umar says, we used to recite in the Qur'an a verse that we no longer found it today. Al-Shaykh wal-Shaykha idha zanaya fajliduhuma al-batta. That if an old man or an old woman fornicate, then whip them for sure. He says, I don't find this verse in our Qur'an today. If we're going to accuse each other, if we have narrations, they have narrations. But we have a solution to our narrations. Our narrations do not mean that the Qur'an has been tampered with or has been distorted. But it is showing that this was the meaning of the verse. We believe that the meanings of the verses have been tampered with, not the words of the verses. What do I mean by this? It's like someone who gives a lecture, gives a speech, and then an analyst comes and says, well, I think this is what he meant by the lecture. He didn't mean this, he meant that. And he gives a wrong interpretation. This is what believe happened to the Qur'an. There were some ulama came and tampered with the meanings of the Qur'an, ma'ani al-Qur'an, not alfaz al-Qur'an, not the actual words. So for example, the verse, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. They say this verse was revealed regarding Abu Talib. Allah is telling Allah is telling Rasulullah that you, Ya Rasulullah, you do not guide who you want. Rasulullah wanted to guide his uncle Abu Talib, but he couldn't. Allah is telling him, you don't guide who you want. We guide who we want. This is a distortion of the meaning of the Qur'an. And so many verses. They say the verse, Ya ayyuhan nabi, hasbuka Allah wa man ittaba'aka min al-mu'minin. That Rasulullah had 39 Sahaba that followed him. The 40th was Umar ibn al-Khattab. When Umar ibn al-Khattab converted to Islam, Allah tells Rasulullah, حسبك الله ومن اتبعك من المؤمنين. Ya Rasulullah, you have enough supporters. You have enough Ansar. Why? Because Umar ibn al-Khattab has converted to Islam and now you have 40 supporters. This is a distortion of the meaning of the verse. It's not a distortion of the words of the verse, it's a distortion of the meaning of the verse. So, it's a silly accusation that is being thrown around. They accuse us of believing in fabrication. We accuse them of believing in fabrication. At the end of the day, both Sunnis and Shi'as accept the Qur'an as is. As is. The Qur'an that we have today, starting from Surah Al-Fatiha, ending with Surah An-Nas, from cover to cover, we believe this book has been revealed by Allah Azza wa Jal. Of course, not in that order. Not in that order, because the first verse that was revealed was اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, Surah Al-Alaq. The last verse was اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم, Surah Al-Ma'idah. But this is the book that was revealed to Rasulullah. And this is the order that Rasulullah wanted. We both accept this. So it's a silly thing to come and accuse each other of believing in distortion. Our Imams told us to read the Qur'an, memorize the Qur'an as is. They would tell us that any narration that does not conform to the Qur'an, reject the narration. Meaning the Qur'an is the basis. If this Qur'an was tampered with, distorted, why would the Imam say, كلما خالف كتاب الله فهو مردود. كلما خالف كتاب الله فهو زخرف. Anything that goes against the Qur'an, we did not say. It is a fabrication. This means the Qur'an that we have today, as is, was accepted by the Imams. It has legitimacy. It has authority.
Sent to him. So, Sayyidina, what proof do we have that the Qur'an has not been distorted? The same way that we believe that the Bible and the Torah and the other revelation before the Qur'an, we believe they're distorted. What proof do we have that the Qur'an has not been distorted other than sheer belief?
First of all, the Qur'an tells us that the Torah and the Injil have been distorted. يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضعه. The Qur'an in several places tells us that the Torah and Injil have been distorted. While the Qur'an itself tells us that it has been protected. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Dhikr here means the Qur'an itself. We have revealed the Qur'an, we have revealed al-dhikr, which is one of the names of the Qur'an, and we will be its protector. إِنَّا لَحَافِظُونَ. لَحَافِظُونَ. We shall be its protector. Not that it doesn't speak in the past tense, but in the present and in the future. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We shall be its protector from distortion. So this is one. Some say, well, and I've seen this argument that from some akhbaris that it has been protected, but not physically. It's protected in the hearts of the Imams. It's preserved in the hearts of the Imams. بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين آمنوا. It is protected and preserved in the hearts of the Imams. So the Imams hold the true Qur'an, and that's enough of protection. Allah protected it and kept it with the Imams. This is false. When Allah is saying إِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, means that we've preserved it for the people. Otherwise, what difference is there between the Qur'an, Torah, and Injil? We believe that Islam is the final message. It is the final religion. And Rasulullah is the final messenger. The Qur'an is the final book. If the Qur'an was distorted just like all the other books, then we would need another religion. Exactly. We would need another messenger. We would need another book to come and fix the distortions of the Qur'an. So what value does the Qur'an have over other books? So this is why we reject the notion that the Qur'an has been distorted. Also, bring me another version of the Qur'an. There are other versions of the Old Testament. There are other versions of the New Testament. there are various versions, various copies, various versions, while the Quran is one. The Quran is one. There aren't different versions. Yes, there's different qira'at. The qira'at are different.
Yeah.
Maliki yawmiddin or Maliki yawmiddin. That's a difference in reading. And because of the Kufan writing style and there were no dots, there's a difference in the different readings of the Quran, not different versions. We don't have different versions. We have different readings. Maliki yawmiddin, Maliki yawmiddin. حتى يطهرنا أو حتى يطهرنا. There's a shadda or isn't there? Isn't a shadda? This is a different reading of the Quran.
There's another popular one called Khalaf an Hamza. It's a really popular now online. It's like growing in popularity, and everyone in the comments is confused because the reciter is reciting and he says, "If atika hadith Musi," everyone's like, "Musi, it's Musa, Nabi Musa. Who's Musi?" They don't realize that there's different qira'at involved.
Right. So that doesn't mean there are different versions to the Quran. These are different qira'at, different readings, or a way to read certain words in the Quran.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's been distorted. There's one copy of the Quran. This copy that we have today, it's accepted universally by all Muslims. Bring me a group, a faction, even if there's a minority that says, look, we have a different copy. We have a different book. Where? Bring me that book. Bring me that different copy. They all believe in the same exact copy. The copy that is distributed by King Fahd in Saudi Arabia, you will find it in the Shia world. Copies that you find in the Shia world, you will find in the Sunni world. Examine the two copies. Examine the various copies. They're exactly the same. Isn't that enough proof that the Quran was not distorted, was not tampered with? Those who accuse us that the Quran was also tampered with, bring me a different copy. Bring me a version of the Quran. There isn't. From New Zealand all the way to the West Coast in Vancouver or California. I was going to say California. They all believe in the same Quran. They all believe in the same copies. Also, look at the eloquence of the Quran. If someone were to tamper with the Quran, either add a verse or subtract a verse, add or take away,
it'll stick out.
It would stick out like a sore thumb, and the whole meaning would change. Even those that say, okay, well, there weren't any additions to the Quran, but some verses were taken out. For example, there were verses that contained the names of the Imams in the Quran, but they were taken out. This is ridiculous. The vast majority of our ulama do not accept this. There might be a very small fraction that hold this opinion, but it is unpopular, unorthodox, unaccepted, and is totally rejected. If you take out a word from the Quran, the whole meaning changes. The eloquence goes. While we all believe that the Quran is eloquent in its sentences, in its verses, in its chapters, you take one word out, the whole meaning changes. It'll stick out like a sore thumb. There'll be a problem. Look, even at the grammar of the Quran, there isn't a single grammatical error in the Quran. A single grammatical error. Some will say, well, what?
Why does it say Becca instead of Mecca?
No, not just that. Becca, that's the old meaning of Mecca. But they will try to point out grammatical errors in the Quran. They're not grammatical errors. You will find a solution. You just have to pay attention to the i'rab, and you will find solutions to the so-called grammatical errors. There are grammatical errors. Impossible. You won't find. That's enough proof that this book is divine, because if it was from human, you will find grammatical errors. Bring me the best books, the best Arabic books and literature, and Arabic literature, you will find at least one grammatical error. Or it has been checked numerous times. The Quran, you won't find a single grammatical error. You won't find discrepancies. You won't find scientific mistakes. You won't find any sort of mistakes in the Quran. That is enough proof that it is divine and it has not been tampered with. Because as soon as you make additions, or subtractions. You take out a verse, you add a verse, you take out a word, the whole thing changes. And there will be discrepancies, there will be mistakes, at least grammatical mistakes. You don't find that in the Quran. And that's the biggest proof that it has not been distorted or tampered with. It is eloquent the way it is. The way it is, the way that we read it today, it is in its best form. In its best form. So where's the distortion? Where did they add or take out verses? Where?
Ahsantum. But there's also some claims made. They'll tell you that, okay, even if our Qur'ans currently are the same between the Sunni world and the Shi'i world, they say, oh, well, you guys believe that your Mahdi has the correct Qur'an. He has this book called Mushaf Fatima. You guys believe in a different Qur'an. You just don't have it now. It's with the Mahdi. Oh, of course they say, much ruder things when they're speaking about Sahib al-Zaman. But they say it's with him, and you guys believe that he's going to bring a new Qur'an, which is not a form of current tahrif, because we believe that in the future there will be a different one. I've never heard of this. When I was raised, I was never told this. But these are the claims that people come up with online. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, we believe that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajah will come with the original meanings to the Quran. The original meanings, not the original words. The Quran will come as is. He won't bring a new copy of the Quran, but he will bring the genuine meanings of the Quran. Because perhaps we've gone astray with some of the meanings. Some of the meanings have been distorted, not the words. Al-Imam al-Mahdi will take us back to the original Islam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he will command us with that Islam, the Quran that with its meanings during the time of Rasulullah. Some of us have gone far because of our ijtihad, because of our understanding. We've misunderstood some of the verses of the Quran. Imam al-Mahdi will take us back. Not that he will bring us a new copy of the Quran. No. As for Mushaf Fatima was a book that belonged to Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, and it is a collection of ahadith Qudsiyya. We have al-Hadith al-Qudsi, which are divinely sayings, but not revelations, meaning not Quran. For example, there's a Hadith Qudsi that says, "As-sawmu li, wa ana ujazi an." Fasting is for me, and I will reward for it. Because all other acts of worship we can show off in, except fasting. You can't show off in fasting because you're not doing anything to show off with. عبدي أطعني تكن مثلي تقول للشيء كن فيكون, or تكن مثلي تقول للشيء كن فيكون. These are ahadith Qudsiyya. My servant, obey me, you will become like me. You can tell the thing be and it will be. There's a lot of ahadith Qudsiyya, and I have a lecture on al-Hadith al-Qudsi. Mushaf Fatima was a compilation of ahadith Qudsiyya and possibly some prophetic narrations as well. That is Mushaf Fatima.
Where is it now?
Fatima. We believe that we have some of al-Hadith al-Qudsiyya, and we believe that the whole of it is with Imam al-Mahdi. Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajah al-Sharif, and he will bring it with him. Not that he will bring a new Qur'an with new words, with a new copy. No. He will bring new meanings to the Qur'an, the original meanings of the Qur'an, the true, original, untampered meanings of the Qur'an as Allah wanted it to be. He will come and teach us that original Islam, because we've gone far away. Not that the Qur'an has been distorted, no.
I think they heard the word Mushaf, which I believe means book.
Mushaf means a book.
But it's come to mean the Qur'an.
But because we use it so much with Masahif that we associate it to mean a copy of the Qur'an. Mushaf literally means a book. There's a lot of books that are called Mushaf. There's books of Hadith that are called Mushaf. We've seen in both schools of thought, Mushaf. There's Mushaf Ali, or Sahifatu Ali, and this is in in our traditions, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam or Imam Zayn Abidin alayhi salam is asked about a ruling, about a hukm, and he says, في صحيفة علي or في مصحف علي كذا وكذا. He'll narrate from Mushaf Ali. Or he had the actual Mushaf, and it was it was like a scroll, a big scroll, and the Imam would open it and he'd read. This was not a Qur'an. It was not a copy of the Qur'an. It contained a hadith of the Prophet. It contained teachings. It contained rulings and ahkam. It contained tafsir of the Qur'an, not the Qur'an itself, not a separate Qur'an. Not a separate Quran. It contained narrations, ahadith, ahkam, and tafsir of the Holy Quran. Some will say that, yes, there's a narration that after the death of Rasulullah, Imam Ali came out with a copy of the Quran. They told him, no, we've already put the Quran in its order. لا حاجة لنا إلى كتابك. So Amir al-Mu'mineen took his Quran and he came back and that's the original Quran. Yes. The story, if it happened, let's say that this hadith is authentic. Imam Ali had a copy of the Quran with its tafsir, narrations from the Holy Prophet, because Amir al-Mu'mineen would record everything that Rasulullah would say, and that Mushaf or in that Sahifa, he had recorded the Quran with its tafsir, not that Amir al-Mu'mineen had a separate copy of the Quran that differs from the rest of the copies. Absolutely not.
Ahsantum. Now, just to wrap up with a couple of points, one of the things that is mentioned a lot, and it's funny because I think the last 2 episodes I was vehemently against polemical topics, or at least I made it sound that way. But a lot of people say, okay, sure, you don't have your own Qur'an, you don't believe in your own Qur'an, you use the same Qur'an, but who wrote this Qur'an? Who compiled it? And the compilers were none other than, Uthman ibn Affan, the 3rd Caliph, or Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. They call him Katib al-Wahi. They ascribe these titles. They say, you are reading from a book that was made by these peoples that you dislike, that you are against. How can you read from it and appreciate it and respect this book so much, but not respect the people that compiled it? And I believe that this is kind of a pretty common point of contention. So I also wanted to ask you about that.
First of all, the Quran was compiled by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself in his lifetime with the help of some Sahaba. Yes, some Sahaba could have participated. Uthman, likely. Muawiyah, very unlikely to have participated in compiling the Quran. Uthman, possibly. He was, at the end of the day, a son-in-law of Rasulullah, and he knew how to read and write. Some of the Sahaba did not know how to read and write. Uthman knew how to read and write. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, very likely to have been one of the main compilers of the Quran with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But at the end of the day, this was a project that was led by Rasulullah. Rasulullah was telling them, he was collecting the verses and the chapters and the verses, and he was telling them exactly in which order to compile the verses, starting from Surah Al-Fatiha, ending with Surah Al-Nas. He was the compiler. Yes, Rasulullah did not write. He did not write himself. Not that he did not know how to write, but he didn't write so that he would not be accused of authoring the Quran. But it was a group of Sahaba. One of them was Uthman, and this is highly exaggerated. It is. They make it seem that he's the only writer to the Quran. No, he was one. He was one. Yeah. He was part of a committee. He was one. Ali ibn Abi Talib was another. He was a major player in this committee of writing the Quran. Ali ibn Abi Talib knew how to read and write. But everything happened at the hands of Rasulullah. It was compiled at the hands of Rasulullah. When Rasulullah left, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم. The religion had been completed. And part of that completion is that the Quran was compiled and set to be dispersed among the Ummah. Rasulullah would not leave. Allah would not allow Rasulullah to leave if the Quran had not been compiled in its right order and then Rasulullah departs. That's not the completion of religion.
Exactly. And finally, a lot of the times, the people will accuse the Shia of, and this actually there may be some real truth to it, that we lack a focus on the Quran. Quranic studies, recitation of the Quran is lacking in our communities. And I believe this is something true. Like we can always do more. So what are some words of advice maybe that you have to our shabab, to the youth, the Shia youth in the West, who sometimes, even like myself, I'm gonna admit I probably listen to Latmiyat more than I listen to the Quran. It's not necessarily a good thing or something I'm entirely proud of. So what are some suggestions that you have to? It's right now. It's Shahr Ramadan. Inshallah, it'll still be Shahr Ramadan when this episode is released. To the youth, to get more connected with the Quran, what can you share?
First of all, I suggest that we all read a juz'ah of Quran throughout the year, and not just the month of Ramadan. All year long, we recite one juz'ah. If you recite one juz'ah a day, that means you're reciting 30 ajza per month. Every month you're finishing an entire khatma. That's 12 khatmat a year. So that's reading the Quran, living with the Quran every day on a daily basis, at least giving it 20 to 30 minutes of our time. Then comes tafsir of Quran. This comes by either reading or listening. For those who have time to read, I would tell them first read tafsir and don't listen, because that gives you hands-on experience with tafsir. And we have amazing tafsir. We have tafsir al-Mizan. We have tafsir al-Amthal. Al-Amthal is more readable. Tafsir al-Mizan is a difficult read. It's more in depth. Tafsir al-Amthal is more practical. It's an easy read. It's very relevant. It's very modern. And we have all tafsir like tafsir al-Tibyan, tafsir Majma' al-Bayan. We have tafsir Nur al-Thaqalain. We have tafsir al-Safi wal-Asfa by Al-Fayd al-Kashani, which is solely based on the narrations of Ahl al-Bayt. We have tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi. We have a whole range of tafsir. To read these tafsir. Some of them have been translated into English. If they haven't, this should be a project for us to do, translate some of these tafsir in English. Al-Kafi contains a lot of narrations that explain the Quran. We have to familiarize ourselves with these narrations. 3, memorization of the Quran. For those of us that can memorize the Quran as much as possible. Of course, if we were to read the Quran throughout the year, that can help us in memorization.
Yeah.
Because you'll be able to memorize the Quran quicker and faster by reciting it throughout the year. Paying attention to the Quran. Our lectures, I think, should revolve around the Quran. We should have seminars, workshops. Just give more attention to the Quran, even on a university level. We need more studies on the Quran. We need more journals on the Quran. Oxford has a journal of Quranic studies. Imagine, Oxford universities cares more for the Quran. But when they're writing on the Quran, it's not that they're serving the Quran. They're writing articles that are anti-Quran.
Yeah.
They're trying to prove that the Quran was distorted. They're trying to prove that the Quran was man-made, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We need to combat on an academic level. We need to have academic journals proving the authenticity of the Quran, proving its originality. The Quran was not authored by humans. The Quran was a miracle on every level, scientifically, economically. The Quran contains meanings that we haven't discovered till today. There's so much that we could do for the Quran, but unfortunately, we have a lot of shortcomings.
Santum. Inshallah, not only in this month, like you said, but the habits that we learn in this month, like reading the juz of the Quran every day, carries on. And I feel like that's the most important part of Shahr Ramadan, is not that you are just holy in this month. It's that the habits that you learn and unlearn in this month carry on throughout the year, including our focus on the Quran as an ummah, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Sayyidina, I'd like to thank you very much for these three podcast series or 3 episode series that we've had with Sayyid Hussein. If you haven't tuned into the last 2, the English Minbar, part 1 and part 2, we really dive into some topics speaking about the English Minbar and its topics, as well as the history and the trajectory of the English Minbar. I highly recommend you give it a listen because Smart Sayyid, he was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sayyidina.
My pleasure.
And yeah, I think that brings it up to a wrap.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much.
My
Smart
pleasure.
Sayyid.
Allah يحفظكم إن شاء الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. أحسنت.